Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionists, and today I'm bringing you a Goosebumps talk type of video. In today's subject, we're talking about a subject that I've been wanting to discuss on this channel for quite some time. And what we're going to be discussing is, what would Season 4 of the original Goosebumps TV show may have looked like if it was a full season. Now, going based on traditional numbers, I think it was 23 episodes, 23 or 24 in the first season, and then it was like 25 in the second, and I think like 22 in the third, something like that. So that would already put it 70-ish episodes. I don't know off the top of my head. But looking on, databases and, doing my research before this video, the average episodes per season that weren't season 4 was about 22 episodes a season, because if you subtract, there were 74 total episodes. There was only 8 episodes in season 4. So if you subtract that, it would have been 66, and then you divide it by 2, or divide it by 3 for 3 other seasons before it, and you would get 22 episodes for those seasons. So I went with 22 episodes for this What If. Now, like I just said, there were already 8 episodes in existence for season 4. And from what I have gathered from reading the Jose Prendez book and reading some stuff online, was that they got to doing the 2-parters, and then they realized that this was going to be the stopping point, so they didn't want to go ahead and do any more episodes. And this was before they ended up canceling the play, I think. Before they made their mind to not make the single-length episodes for the season 4. So for this What If, we're going to have to go back in time into that situation and assume that ratings were going downhill from the show. I'm not going to make a whole other topic talking about my hypothesis on why those things happened, but we're not going to be discussing that too much. We're going to be looking at, let's imagine that they went ahead and put forth a whole season. So what would have happened is the show for season 4 would have aired from, usually it was around September, so it would have been from September of 1998 all the way up until usually May of the following year. So it would have been September of 1998 to May of 1999. So, in consideration, based on historical evidence and historical occurrences, we're not going to be including any books that would have been released after May 1999. We're not going to have any Give Yourself Goosebumps in here. The only series that were up for series consideration were anything short story related. Could have been like the trilogy, the Haunted Library trilogy, or could have been any of the short story stuff that Stein did around short stories. It could have been triple header, Tales, the short story stuff. Of course, the original 62 as well. And then Series 2000, which at that point, as we all know, we only got 2 Series 2000 adaptations in the show. So it's safe to assume that there would have been more. Now, I have been working on this list for over a year, refining it. I mean, there's so many different alternatives I could have taken, but I have solidified my list for multiple reasons, and I'll get into why as I share. In case you don't know, the original 8 episodes of season 4. So the first thing you got to know is that season 4 consisted of 4 2-parters, which consisted of 8 episodes. So the first one was How I Got My Shrunken Head. The next one was The Ghost Next Door. Then it was Cry of the Cat, one of my personal faves. And then it was Deep Trouble, aka Deep Trouble 2, because the plot is closer to Deep Trouble 2 than the first Deep Trouble. So those were the episodes they made for season 4. Now we're going to try to add 14 more episodes. And I'll tell you what, based on the time that this season would have occurred, this was a really tough decision, because a lot of the stuff I could have picked all had a similar twist to it all, or similar setup. You had like the typical new kid trope that was really popular, and it was prevalent in a lot of things left to do. So you had the new kid trope, you had a lot of ghost stories, a lot of that going on, what I mean, monster involved twists and stuff. I was trying not to pick stuff that would have been repetitive for the season. And a lot of people would be upset that I omitted some things from Series 2000 on this season, but hear me out on my explanation as I go along, okay? So, we had to fill 14 episodes. Now, I'm going to get to the final book near the end, but I want to start off with the original 62 I chose, because I think the original 62 pretty much were phasing out of the show. There is one that I think they could still make, but I saved it for maybe a hypothetical season 5 after. And I'll share 3 more books. So this is going to be episodes, I guess 9 and 10, 9, 10 and 11 if you want to count that. These are single length episodes I drafted onto the season to make it a full season. So the first draft I have here is The Curse of Camp Cold Lake. Now, the reason why I went with The Curse of Camp Cold Lake was I could have easily gone with Ghost Camp, considering that they might have known that there would have been a sequel to Ghost Camp. It would have been obvious to do that one in season 4, and then maybe do the follow-up in season 5 if they got to that point. But in hindsight, I think the editing to Ghost Camp would be more tremendous than the tweaks that you would need to make on this book. And honestly, I think that as much as I love Ghost Camp as a book, I would rather see them improve this book than try to just adapt Ghost Camp and have to nerf the story. Really, this one has a lot of potential to change. Like, you don't have to do the camp setting. You can make it like an RV camp where like families go camp. You can tweak little bits there. You can tweak things about the main character. You can tweak things about the plot of the story or the issues that the book had. You can easily improve it. And that's why I settled on this one. And plus, based on camp stories, I think that Welcome to Camp Nightmare was the only one from the original Goosebumps show. So it would be a no-brainer to have another camp story. So that's why I drafted it. Yeah, it would be a 22-minute episode, but you can cut out a lot of the filler the book has and do an effective job. So that's my first pick. The next pick would be an episode I'm shocked they never got to before. And this one would be a simple one to do because all you need is a house. You can tweak. There's a scientist lab in this book. You can just tweak it to make it like a school science lab. And it's little things you can tweak to make it work, to fit budget if they needed to. And that is Egg Monsters from Mars. Yeah, I think they would either have to CGI or make a practical like monster animatronic or something for the egg monsters, but this one would be relatively easy to do. So I would think that if they would have continued season 4, this would have already been on there, like for sure. So that's why I have it. And the last of the original 62 I have is one that would require a little bit of tweaking as far as subject matter. Now, they could easily pull this episode off, maybe not showing transformations and the body horror things. They could maybe do some pan outs, make some gurgling sounds, and then pan back and then show the monster involved. They can easily trim the story down to make it more concise, make it easier to follow than the book was. I guess for some people, it's hard to follow the book. I'm not going to lie. When I read this thing recently, I had to go back and reread the end like maybe once or twice to understand it. But I did get a hang of it, but I had to go back. But I think they can easily pull this off. I don't think a budget would be the issue. I think the thing would be you would have to trim some of the darker elements out and keep some in, but do some like pan out shots for it. And that is I Live in Your Basement. This is really the only other one I would think they would consider doing around this time. I just don't see the budget being there for episodes like Beast from the East. And maybe one other episode they might entertain doing, but I also have an alternative I'll share. But yeah, these 3 ended up for the original 62 add-ons for like episodes 9, 10, and 11. Like Egg Monsters, Cold Lake, and Basement. These were the 3 I added on from original 62 to season 4. Now, going to Series 2000. Now, this might upset a few folks, but I actually only added 2 more Series 2000 onto this season. And hear me out. I think that by the time May 1999 would have rolled around, there would have been a lot of stories that would have been fun to do, but for this specific season, it would have been getting kind of repetitive because there's a good amount of ghost and supernatural stuff that was being released in Series 2000 at the time. And there's also some untouched territory in Triple Header that's also equally supernatural, to where I try to diversify this season up a little bit because based on what I picked, there was like already 3 ghost stories. I didn't want to put like 5 or 6 ghost stories in one season, so I'm trying to spread them out, okay? But I did settle on this one because I think this would have been an easy one to make for production. This would have been a shoo-in to get made. I'm almost hard confident on. Even though I hate this story, I mean, the episode adaptation, you can only go up from there, really, to improve this book. So I thought, why not add it? And it's Revenge R Us. It's kind of bordering a rehash of Be Careful What You Wish For, but there's some originality there. I think this would be less of an issue to do over something like I'm Your Evil Twin or Headless Halloween for this season. I think something like Headless Halloween you would need to have a 2-parter for. And I do have an extra 2-parter I added to this season, but I'm going to get to that near the end, why I chose that specific one. But I chose Revenge R Us. This would have been, akin. They like to put out episodes of books they have to improve book sales. This one probably would have done it, so that's why Revenge R Us is episode, what we got, 9, 10, 12. Episode 13 is a personal favorite of mine, and also I think they would go with this episode. And this adapting this one right here prevented me from doing like 2 other ones I really wanted to be on this season a long time ago. I used to have former drafts with like Ghoul School and or Creature Teacher on it, but I chose this because the new kid out of school element was getting kind of heavy in the season, because I noticed that from all the stories left over that I think the show would have wanted to do, they all had this common element of this new kid attending a new school. And I didn't want it to be like that obvious that they're doing the same setup like that. So I settled with one, and I picked a Series 2000 because I think this would have been more beneficial for them to make over Ghoul School and over the other choice I had in my head. I think Creature Teacher, based on the time that this would have released, this would have been a relatively new book. So we have Are You Terrified Yet? All you need is a jar of spiders, you find a funeral home, dress some people up like ghouls, and you're pretty much good to go. It's pretty simple. So that's episode 13. Now that's pretty much the last -1 of the full-length books. I did go a little heavy on the short stories, and technically one of them is kind of like a half short story. I think they would put this in there, or they would just make something fresh for the show specifically. But we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so episode, where are we at? 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We're at episode 14, okay? So this one I went with, it was pretty much down to this and another short story from Tales Book 6. But I went with this one because I think the show would have probably entertained doing this. Now, they did something with a movie set already with Cry of the Cat. But then again, in Season 3, they did 2 amusement park stories with A Shocker on Shock Street and One Day at Horrorland. So sometimes that doesn't matter. I mean, there's been 2 Halloween stories in Season 2. It doesn't matter. But I went with this one because I think the producers would have liked doing this episode. And I can tell, based on the Cry of the Cat, I think they would have done a really good job on this, and probably could have added or changed little things about the story to make it better for people who didn't like it. So I chose from Tales to Give You Goosebumps, Book 2, More Tales to Give You Goosebumps, I chose Dr. Horror's House of Video. This one, you might need to build a set for, which isn't the biggest thing. Most of the other episodes, you can just go on site and film. But this one probably would require a set of some sort. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, they probably already had the season 3 set. They can just clear some stuff out and just build a movie set for Dr. Horror's movie studio, and you're good to go. Maybe tweak some elements to the story if you wanted to, if they wanted to. That's cool. But I think this one would have been a solid one to make. So, yeah, at episode 14, we got Dr. Horror's House Video. At episode 15, we have a story from the 4th Tales to Give You Goosebumps, still more Tales to Give You Goosebumps, and I picked a Halloween story pick. Now, at one point, I had like 2 or 3 Halloween stories, and I said, well, that's a little too much. And I ended up cutting it down to 1, only because there wasn't a true Halloween episode in season 3. So I went with this. I think this one would have been easy to make. You can just pick a house, location, pick a kitchen, make a mess, go wild, find a street, decorate it like Halloween, and you can do the story pretty easily. So I went ahead and picked this story. I think it would have been a fun one for the show, and that is Pumpkin Juice. It's a monster story, but it has a fun twist, has a fun angle to it. I think a lot of people would really appreciate this being in a episodic setting. This is one that when I was reading it for the first time, I think a while ago, because some of these I never got around to reading as a kid. When I read Pumpkin Juice, I was like, this would have been a fantastic episode. And I still think that, and I would have definitely pegged it to be on a season 4. It's friendly on the budget, probably would have gotten made, so yeah, Pumpkin Juice. Alright, so now we're on the 16th episode here. Now the 16th one, or are we on the 16th one? Yeah, we're on the 16th one. So the 16th one, we have a choice I made to kind of substitute for the missing episode I wanted to put on, which was The Abominable Snowman of Pasadena. I knew with Pasadena, it had already gotten like mentioned, and then I think scrapped by producers at one point. I think the Bumps talked, like there was a thing on the Bumps about it. I read on Wiki or something. Now, this story doesn't involve like ice, like freezing people, but it has a similar concept to it. And I think that there's also an idea reminiscent to the Cuckoo Clock of Doom, dealing with Michael being the older brother and Tara being the evil younger sister. There is an element that could be revisited here. I think Strained Peas kind of talked on it, but not too much. But this one would have been a shoe-in to make. All you need to do is make a little gargoyle statue for the gargoyle character. Make a character of stone. I mean, they did it kind of in Be Careful What You Wish For, but I would actually go and make an actual statue of this character or actor, whoever you chose. And I chose a story, the story I'm Telling, from the 3rd book from Tales to Give You Goosebumps series, Even More Tales to Give You Goosebumps. I'm Telling has that same mechanism that Pasadena has, except it uses like water guns with ooze that oozes out of this gargoyle statue thing, I think from memory. So I think they could pull that off. It would be easy to pull this episode off. All you gotta do is find some woods. I mean, maybe the flying bits in this short story, it's easy to cut out flying. All you can do is make it like a gargoyle with like broken wings or something. Make it to where you don't have to make it fly. It's simple things like that you could just tweak and make it work. This one would work just fine, I think. So yeah, so we have I'm Telling. All right, so we have 13, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right, so episode 17, we have a story I picked. Now, this one pretty much ruled out Ghoul School completely from season 4 for me. I wanted to put Creature Teacher on. I really did. I really wanted to put Creature Teacher on this, but then again, I just don't see them. I just don't see the budget there for a single episode. I think they would do it for a 2-parter for Creature Teacher, but yeah, I don't see it. And I think there's enough story there to make a 2-parter for Creature Teacher. For Ghoul School, I was in serious consideration. That one probably would be fun for them to make. It's a fun story. It's not great or anything, but it's fun. But then I remembered they made like 2 werewolf stories, and they made two mummy stories, but they only had 1 vampire story from memory. I think they only had 1. So I went with the choice from the first Tales to Give You Goosebumps book, and I went with A Vampire in the Neighborhood. Now this one deals with a new kid, except the main characters are these 4 girls trying to prove to each other that this girl that just moved here is this goth-looking girl is a vampire, and that's what the story's about, and with a cool twist to it. But this twist prevented me from doing like stories like Werewolf's First Night or something, because a lot of these leftover stories from Tales have similar feeling twists. Okay, so you have to space them out. But I went with this one because I think a vampire story would have fit nicely here for the show. So, yeah. So we have A Vampire in the Neighborhood. Alright, so episode 18, we have a story from the 5th Tales to Give You Goosebumps book. Now, I was pretty much on the fence of doing this story because of the subject matter. This does involve a murderous character, but then again, murder was done in Piano Lessons Give Me Murder. I mean, it wasn't a topic that wasn't afraid to be discussed in that episode. It's heavily implied that people died to make Mr. Toggle's, fantasy come to life. So, this story, I think they can tweak a little bit. Maybe take away some of the weaponry that's in the short story and change it with something else. But all they need to do is have a school lunchroom, pick out a school location, put some creepy makeup on a woman, and then scare the crap out of the kids, and then you have a good episode. Okay, so I picked What's Cooking. Okay, now What's Cooking is an episode kind of like an old story where you can really do a lot with it if you wanted to. I mean, there's some things you can change if you wanted. You can change the recipe, you can change what they make, you can change how the character looks, backgrounds of the other characters. I mean, there's so much you can do with this. But the premise is the scary part. There's like an urban legend feel to it. You chant the name 3 times, it's kind of like Bloody Mary. It has a cool twist to it at the end if they kept the twist. I mean, I'd be shocked if they did a better twist than what's at the end of this. But I think this one would be pretty effective. And you don't have to go the whole big climactic budget that something like Creature Teacher would do. You have to find a private boarding school. You have to make this whole costume for this person to make it look like Miss Marg. You need this grandiose setting, pace. You need room for pace. This one is kind of a substitute for that, for this season. So that's why I just chose What's Cooking for this spot. Alright, so episode, I think where we're at 13, 14, episode 19, I went with something from the 6 Tales to Give You Goosebumps story. Yes, I picked one from each. And yeah, I picked a holiday one. And the reason why is I think it'll be fun to diversify what they had going on in the show previously and finally add in a holiday-centric story. Now, which one I went with, there was really only 2 options here. It was this one and A Holly Jolly Holiday. But considering that, there was like horror movies mentioned in like 3 other episodes of this season, kind of just washed that out. Maybe save it, put that aside for a season 5 maybe. But I did put this one on because it would be so easy to make this. All you need is a set. Now, there is snow in the story, but you can just change that and make it. They're in California. There is no snow. It's stuff like that you can just change and make it work. But you can still make the concept work. You might need a set to build a workshop for a specific character. But I went with the story from Tales Book 6, More and More and More Tales to Give You Goosebumps. I went with Santa's Helpers. It's honestly the only story that I think could be improved if the clichéness was dialed back a little bit. All you got to do is find a Santa Claus and a Mrs. Claus and find some elves and dress up like a Santa's workshop. It's kind of an eerie story when you think about it. It has a really fun twist to it, I will say. The twist is kind of really good. But, yeah, this one would be a fun one to do. And I think a lot of kids, including, like, as a man kid, Would love to see Santa Claus in the Goosebumps show. How cool would that have been? So, yeah, I think they would have entertained making this one, seriously. So, yeah, we have Santa's helpers. All right, for the 20th episode, we're going back to Tales Book 1 and slightly something else, okay? So, I can't decide between this story and a home-written Slappy episode. I'm leaning that since Slappy had an episode in every other season, if this season was a full season, we wouldn't have had Slappy's Nightmare in time by May of 1999. So, my guess would have been that Slappy's Nightmare would have been in season 5. So, if they had a full season, most likely they would have just written a Slappy episode for the show. That's what I'm thinking. Just a homegrown Slappy episode would be the 20th episode. But, as a just in case, I do have one that's pretty much equal that I think they would have entertained making. And it's already the Night of the Living Dummy formula. All they're going to have to do is just use a different monster. So I picked Mr. Teddy from Tales to Give You Goosebumps. Book 1 is it's an equal option. I can see either a Slappy homegrown episode or Mr. Teddy. I'm leaning Slappy, but realistically, I think Mr. Teddy would have been a good option too. So that's the 20th episode. Now the final 2 episodes, episodes 21 and 22, May of 1999 would have been around this time when this book released for Series 2000. And since they did the previous book in Season 3, I just feel like this would have been the 5th two-parter in the show, and the final 2 episodes I'm including on the Season 4 What If It Was a Full Season draft. And I have added Return to Horrorland. Now, there's some crossover elements in this episode, like I think there's a book, there was like a Mazo and Evan Ross. There's so much the show could just change and do if they wanted. They could bring back Catherine Long if they wanted to, do the Haunted Mask instead of a Mazo. I mean, there's so much to work with here. Maybe some new characters. It would definitely need to be a 2-parter, but given that the time, kind of like going back to the Are You Terrified Yet argument, it would have been silly if they didn't put this one out then. Because it would have just made sense. Right? Now, for Season 5, when we're talking about like Invasion of the Body Squeezers, Creature Teacher, Headless Halloween, stuff like that, I think Season 5 would have been, if there was going to keep continuing, that's when they would have done those. But I think Return to Horrorland would have been a 5th two-parter consideration. And honestly, based on the other options, I really couldn't find any other single-length episodes to kind of replace it. Now, I do have alternates. Instead of doing a 2-parter for this, I did come up with Ghost Granny from the first triple header, and then I had something like Tune In Tomorrow from the 5th Tales to Give You Goosebumps. They can do those instead of doing this as a 2-parter, but I'm leaning that they would have done this instead. So yeah, let's run down the episodes one last time that I added to the show. So we had the first 8 episodes were these 2-parters of How I Got My Shrunken Head, The Ghost Next Door, Cry of the Cat, and Deep Trouble, aka Deep Trouble 2. So I added The Curse of Camp Cold Lake, Egg Monsters from Mars, I Live in Your Basement, Revenge R Us, Are You Terrified Yet, Dr. Horror's House of Video, Pumpkin Juice, I'm Telling, A Vampire in the Neighborhood, What's Cooking, a homegrown Slappy episode and or Mr. Teddy, Santa's Helpers, and I added Return to Horrorland Part 1 and Part 2 to make the season a total of 22 episodes. So yeah, that is my What If Season 4 was a full-length season. Let me know down in the comment section if you think my picks were good. What would you have changed? What do you disagree with? What do you agree with? Let me know. Keep the conversation going. What would you have put in Season 4 to make it a full-length season at 22 episodes? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.